Let's talk about Phil Hogan and what's happened there in this interview that the former Trade Commissioner gave to the French newspaper Libération, in which he wouldn't rule out the idea of demanding compensation for the damage that he said he suffered as a result of the loss of his job. Aoife, it was a story that you broke in the Examiner in August of 2020. That meeting, that golf event in the hotel in Clifton. Phil Hogan being among the casualties there. What do you make of this development in the story and the lines that he's given to the French newspaper?
I was never been so sad that I couldn't speak French, for starters, this morning when the story broke. I'm not surprised. We have seen in the very brief media that Phil Hogan has done in the time, I believe it was the Kilkenny People, he gave his first interview. Well, he sounded very bitter. He said, he felt he'd been pushed out. He took great umbrage at Leo Varadkar and Micheál Martin's and Eamon Ryan's intervention. And he obviously, he apologised at the time after Golfgate, but it became very clear very quickly that he wasn't happy about how he'd been treated. So I'm not overly surprised. He did say, he's found losing his job very traumatising. He didn't feel like he'd get a fair hearing, which I thought was quite interesting, because at the Fine Gael Parliamentary Party meeting last week, a similar thing happened where a number of senators said that they wanted Leo Varadkar to make a statement on it because they didn't feel that their senators had gotten a fair hearing. They felt that, they didn't get to put up their arguments and they'd been pushed out almost immediately. So there is parallels here. I'm quite excited for the Fine Gael Parliamentary Party meeting this week when Leo Varadkar is back. But I do think it's quite interesting now that, because the court in Galway obviously dismissed the charges and said, no laws had been broken. But I was very much, and maybe I was wrong at the time, but I was very much under the impression that Golfgate was such a big deal because it was like the public impression of us all being in it together with COVID-19. Yeah,
this was the big one, really. It's sort of the law of the land versus the court of public opinion on this in what Phil Hogan and others did, Jim. Do you think he has a case there when he's thinking of demanding compensation from the European Commission?
Well, listen, the last 2 years have been a very difficult time for everyone in the country, and they've been a difficult time for politicians as well. And I can understand why Phil Hogan and others may feel that they were hard done by. So I'm slightly sympathetic to politicians, even though I'm a politician myself, and I don't think we should regard politicians as being a separate group. Listen, I haven't looked at the nature of the claim. He may bring a claim that he was constructively dismissed. I don't know. It's a matter for him to decide. Every person's entitled to bring a claim if they want to. It's a matter for them. You're entitled to bring a claim. Any member of the public's entitled to bring a claim. But I would have thought he got some vindication from the decision of the Galway District Court. Like, there's no doubt as a result of that decision, but that the event was lawful.
Well, it didn't get him back in the job, though.
No, it didn't. And I suppose, listen, unfortunately, politics is different from other walks of life. And I've seen this, but I feel very sorry for Derek O'Leary. But I suppose if you go back to the events of August 2020, there was a frenzy there. And I suppose I was one of the people at the time who was critical of the event, but I didn't think it was necessary for people to resign. I think sometimes we need a more proportionate response to political indiscretion. You don't
think he should have lost his job then?
I think we were, taking away the personalities of it, I think it was a major failure of our national interest to lose a trade commissioner, irrespective of who that person was. It's a huge position in Europe, and I thought at the time, and I still think now, that the country had a disservice done to it by us losing a trade commissioner. But listen, these things have happened in the past.
We have to think about where we were at in the country, Jim. A lot of people, we were locked down into counties and we couldn't go places.
I know, it's been a very tough year. I know. Yeah. It was a really tough time. But all I'm saying to you is, I empathise with all the difficulties people have been through. But I think at the time, the country would have been better served had we retained the trade commissionership. People may disagree with me. That's just my own view on it.
Can I just come on there? Yeah, and I would say I'm kind of repeating the point that Shona already made. The whole lead-up to Phil Hogan losing his job was not really about the fact that he went to Clifton or he went to the event. It was the series of anomalies and stories that had come out in the time after about Phil Hogan.
And Claire, also, didn't he say in his own resignation statement that he accepted that everything that you're referring to there had become a distraction? So I'm just a little confused. If he accepted that at that point, that it had been a distraction and that it is about perception, has his position on all of that changed now at this point? He resigned.
Yeah. Now he says he denies, of course, that he breached COVID rules there. But interesting, Ursula von der Leyen saying that even though he obeyed the law, it does not resolve the way that his behaviour was perceived. And again, the
I would just say as well,
perception though, Claire, the fact is that at that time, it wasn't just one incident, it wasn't just one dinner, it wasn't just one hotel. There were a series of incidents and a series of revelations, and there was an arrogance there. People feeling that the full picture had to be essentially dragged out, and that that wasn't forthcoming. I mean, that's something. Look, you talk to people and they will tell you that's the arrogance of a series of parties who have been in government for far too long. There was that arrogance that was there, and that really.
I mean, when you talk about phrases like constructive
it hurt people. And he is perfectly entitled, as Jim says, perfectly entitled to imagine he has a constructive dismissal case, and if he wants to take it, perfectly entitled to take that. However, I do think if we cast our minds back, we can see there was an arrogance there that I think that really rankled with people.
And I think what it comes back to is whether you're sorry or you're not. And now it appears that even though he apologised, he's not sorry because he doesn't think he did anything wrong.
What about the issue, though, that he's taking with the Taoiseach and the Taoiseach and the Green Party leader, Eamon Ryan, coming over, and the idea that that was crucial in Ursula von der Leyen's final decision and how she was going to decide how this was? Were they overstepping the mark there?
I mean, when we use phrases like constructive dismissal, he's a politician. Political pressure was being placed on him. And he fell on the sword of his interview where he came across the wrong way, the changing story, all of those different things. I mean, I just think he's been, as he said in his statement as well, a politician for a very, very long time. He's had many different careers, and you would expect maybe he'd be a bit more clear-minded and realistic about the consequences.